Which brings us to your favorite game, actually.
Yes, this is my favorite Zelda game, and one of my favorite games in general, Twilight Princess.
And oh boy, do I have a lot to say here, and that is not a bad thing. And since I've been talking for like the last 15 minutes, I'm gonna let you kind of take the lead on a lot of the dungeons in here. Because
Okay.
Wind Waker's my favorite Zelda game and my second favorite game of all time. And Twilight Princess is your favorite Zelda game, so this is your time to shine.
Alright, so, let's start with the Forest Temple. I really like how you have to cooperate with the monkeys to get through this place. I think that's really cool. I also really like what they did with the boomerang, how you have to use it to turn the...
I love that they made the boomerang in Twilight Princess, like, not a normal boomerang.
Yeah.
I love that they actually took an item and made it, like, different. Like, they made... The boomerang in Twilight Princess works differently than every other boomerang in the series, and that it's cool. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it still has some... It actually doesn't really have the same utility as the original.
It kind of does, but you don't really use it for that.
It's more like a tornado rather than a boomerang.
Yeah, it's like a tornado projectile, and that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's used really well in the Forest Temple with those bridges.
Yeah, the bridges are cool, the monkeys are cool. I really like the idea that you're just guiding monkeys. Also,
Yeah.
monkey swing, can I just say yes?
Yes.
I love the monkey swing.
I also really like how the mid-boss, after you...
Yes, oh my god, I almost forgot about that.
After you defeat the parasite controlling it, it helps you in the Diababa fight.
Yeah, that's a really nice touch.
Yeah.
I'm thinking A.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come out and say it right now. Forest Temple in Twilight Princess is the best first dungeon in the series.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, it does its job as a first dungeon, and it's, like, the only one that actively goes above and beyond that, and actually does something more interesting. Like, it gives you an item that Zelda veterans are familiar with, and puts a new spin on it, and actually makes it, like, something new that you have to do. And even to somebody who's played the series beforehand, is experiencing something new here, which is not something you can really say about any of the other first dungeons in the series. I love the monkey thing. Like, the closest you've come to that is, like, gathering the 3 statues in Tower of the Gods, and that's nowhere near as interesting as a monkey swing. That's just funny. It's cool.
Yeah.
It has so much charm and character to it that other first dungeons just don't have. And that's something really... It sets a tone for Twilight Princess, and as we'll talk about later, that tone of Twilight Princess dungeons being above and beyond continues. Because it only gets better from here.
Well, in your case, maybe not. Because up next is...
With one exception. Goron Mines. I don't dislike Goron Mines. I have the same problem with it I have with the Fire Temple. It just doesn't do anything for me. Goron Mines is the only dungeon in Twilight Princess that I don't actively remember anything about. It's the only one that I consider to be, like, forgettable. Every other dungeon in this game is, like, super, super good to me, and I remember them very well. Not that I can, like, do them blindfolded or anything. I don't know them that well, but, like, they're very memorable and they stuck with me. Goron Mines is the only one that didn't, and in a game like Twilight Princess, where the dungeons are so freaking good, it kind of stands out as being the only one that isn't. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just... When the bar is so high...
It's kind of hard to...
Yeah.
It's kind of hard for it to keep up with that.
Yeah.
Well, let me try and help you remember a few things about it because
I had it in D, I believe. Let's see if you can knock it up a few pegs.
Okay, I put this one in A tier, which, spoiler alert, all of the dungeons in Twilight Princess, with the exception of one, are A tier for me. or A or S. But yeah, Goron Mines. I do think the opening part is a bit generic, but once you get through that, you're walking on walls and ceilings with the iron boots. You're walking on magnetic cranes with the iron boots. You have water areas, which are really good. You have...
Actually, that's something that never even crossed my mind until you just brought it up. This is the only fire dungeon in the series that has water.
Yeah.
That never even occurred to me until just now. But you're right, it does.
Yeah, I do. I think the iron boots are at their best in Twilight Princess because you not only have the sinking in water thing, but you also have the magnetism going on.
I agree to an extent. I do think that the iron boots are utilized best in Twilight Princess, but they're still so goddamn slow.
That I will agree.
That one room, you know exactly which one I'm talking about, where you're on the ceiling.
Yep.
I hate that room.
I will agree. I will concede that is a very tedious room.
And it's worse because there's also a piece of heart in there, which is out of the way, and it takes like 3 goddamn minutes to go all the way over there, get it, and then walk back to where you're supposed to go. Yeah, I agree that the iron boots are put to their greatest potential the series has ever seen in this dungeon. That being said, it's not as fun to execute just because it's so slow. If they had just sped it up a little bit, I would probably actually really like this place. But like just going through it with the iron boots, I like the idea of like walking on walls. That's really clever. Also, there's this one part where you like jump off a ledge and then put on the boots mid-fall and get caught in like a beam of magnetism that like pulls you into the wall. That is so cool. And then you hit the wall and you have to walk at like a foot per hour. I like the way they're used. The gameplay doesn't. It does not a good job of exemplifying how cool of an idea that is. But yeah, outside of the magnet stuff, it's kind of just like generic fire dungeon. Also,
there is one more thing that it has going for it.
What?
You get the bow in here.
Yeah, that is true. That being said, it also this comes back to what I was saying about how like the bar in Twilight Princess is already set so high that like anything that isn't fantastic is going to stand out. And nowhere, absolutely nowhere, is this more clear than in the boss.
Yeah.
Fyrus is like the most uninteresting boss in the game.
Yeah.
It's so anticlimactic. It's not terrible, but like it's just you barely do anything, and the things that you do feel like they have no weight to it. Like tripping something that gigantic should feel like you should like feel the impact of that, but you don't. You kind of just tug on his ankle and then he anticlimactically and over-dramatically falls. I don't know how to explain it. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. And it's just not... It's not a bad boss fight, but it's the weakest in the game by a significant margin.
Yeah.
Which kind of sums up with my feelings on the dungeon as a whole, but the boss especially. For those magnetism ideas, I think I will bump it up to C. But outside of that, it's just kind of there. I do like the fact that Gorons, like, live here. It kind of adds a nice touch. And also the fact that the boss key is like 3 pieces and you get one from each Goron.
I actually forgot about that part until you brought it up.
Also, it says a lot that the mini-boss is a lot more exciting than the actual boss. Like, sumo wrestling a gigantic Goron, throwing him into a pit of lava over a gigantic magnetic floating disc thing? That's awesome. That's memorable. Tripping something is not. But yeah, it has its moments. But other dungeons in Twilight Princess also have their moments, and their moments are so much better.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I do agree with that one.
C seems fair.
I can concede that one.
Which brings us to the one dungeon I've ever really heard people complain about in Twilight Princess, and that's Lake Bed, and I'm gonna just come out and say it. I don't agree. I like this place.
I like this place too.
I'm gonna put it in A.
That's actually higher than I put it.
Really?
This is the only dungeon that I put in B tier, and that's only because of the. You know what? I wouldn't really say it's a B tier dungeon either. I would call it A2.
It's one of those dungeons where it's like, you hear people complain about it, and you see where they're coming from, and then you play it for yourself, and you realize just how well executed those things actually are.
Yeah.
Like, the one thing that I always hear people complain about is, like, people compare this to the currents from Great Bay, or like changing the water level in the water temple. And this is handled better than both of those.
Yes.
Like, you're flowing water down a waterfall, down a spiral thing that goes through the hallway, down a staircase, which you can then rotate to dictate what room it goes into. That's such a cool idea.
Yeah.
And, like, people say it's tedious, but honestly, I don't see it. I just think it's clever.
Maybe people think the rotating staircase is a bit weird or confusing to...
It is a little bit confusing, and I will admit that, just because, like, it's a little bit annoying, and I experienced this when I just replayed this game. I'm still in the middle of replaying this game, but, in my most recent run of it, and I understand exactly where they're coming from, and I kind of low-key agree, it is kind of irritating figuring out how to make the staircase go where you want it to. Like, the general idea is that you, like, jump off a little ledge and grab a little dangly lever thing, and then it rotates to wherever that lever was. The issue is that there are walls that separate those things, and you have to kind of make a long trip around in order to get from one to the next. And this is mostly fixed once you get the claw shot, because there's targets on the ceiling that let you go over those walls.
Also, the ivy.
Yes, that. So, like, you can... Once you have the claw shot, you can kind of skip that problem altogether, but before you get the claw shot, I absolutely get where people are coming from, and honestly, I think that's what's keeping it from being S for me, because it's easy to understand what you want to do, but actually doing it, like finding the right lever and getting to said lever, can be a little bit of a hassle.
I will say, I do think that...
Also, Morpheal is what Morpha should have been.
Yeah. Before we get to that, though, I will say, I do think the Lakebed Temple is probably the weakest dungeon in the game.
I still think Goron Mines is weaker, in my opinion, but
But that's in a game where the low point is a plateau, basically.
Yeah, you really have to keep in mind that any negative thing we're saying about Twilight Princess dungeons really isn't anything negative. We're just kind of comparing it to the rest of Twilight Princess, because I'm just gonna come out and say it, Twilight Princess has the best dungeons in the series, by far. Like, it's not even close. There are so many that just hit every mark and do it near flawlessly. We'll get to those in a second, but, like, when one isn't... It really says a lot about the quality of dungeons in this game, when the reason something is not S tier is because we're nitpicking.
Yeah, I think Lakebed Temple is one of the better water dungeons in the series, too.
I definitely agree. It's the water mechanic, the way that water flow is handled, is definitely better than Ocarina and Majora. As much as I actually like Great Bay, I will admit Twilight Princess did it better.
I definitely prefer adjusting the water levels and the currents in Lakebed Temple using that staircase a lot more than I did in the Water Temple and the Great Bay Temple.
Yeah.
Because I also think that adjusting that staircase and in such a way to get to where I need to be, I think that racked my brain in a way that was good.
Yeah, like it makes you feel more it gives you like the feeling that you have more control over where the water's going, and it makes you feel better for figuring out what you did.
Yeah. And also Zora, not really Zora Link in this game, but the
swimming controls are pretty good.
The swimming controls are some of the best in the series.
They are very smooth. Yeah. They're a little bit slow for my liking. I prefer Skyward Sword personally, but they're good.
Yeah, the claw shot is an awesome item that I always look forward to.
Oh, also, and before I forget to bring this up, because I always forget to bring this up whenever I'm talking about this dungeon, but the mini-boss is so good.
Yes.
The mini-boss in this dungeon could have been an actual boss. Like, it's actually, like, really grand scale. It's really neat. It's basically the idea of the one mini-boss in Majora's Mask, but done better.
It's also kind of funny looking, too.
It is kind of funny looking. Also, this doesn't really impact my ranking too much because I still love it. And I need to preface that I still love it. But recently, like relatively recently, I forget who pointed this out to me. It might have been Oscar. It might have been Green Scorpion. But I forget who pointed this out, but somebody made it abundantly clear that Morpheal is completely harmless.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything. And now that I know that, I can't unthink it, and it bothers me. Because I've always thought, for as long as I can remember, that Morpheal is like, it's this massive water snake thing. It's gigantic. It's threatening. It's imposing. It makes you feel awesome for taking it down. And now that I know that, I feel like I'm playing Shadow of the Colossus. Which is not a bad thing, because I love Shadow of the Colossus.
That's actually the comparison I was about to make before you said it.
Yeah, like, even before I realized that it was harmless, I still compared that fight to Shadow of the Colossus, because the way you cling to it as it swings around, swims around, that's super cool. It's super thrilling. And then you realize that if you don't do that, it just kind of floats there.
And also, doesn't some of the Colossi not attack you?
Most of them don't attack you.
Yeah, so in a way, it's
until you piss them off. Some of them attack you if you irritate them. But yeah, that's just a nitpick, and that's something that now that I know that, it bothers me. But I still love that boss fight. I will still love the crap out of that boss fight. That just makes me kind of a little bit dead inside, knowing that it can't do anything to me.
I love Morpheal just as a spectacle.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. It's thrilling because it's so gargantuan. You really feel like you accomplished something once it's dead.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, oh boy, this one's fun. Oh god, instant S tier. Instant S tier. Don't even need to think about it. Arbiter's Grounds is amazing.
Yes, it is. Arbiter's Grounds is... I'm almost tempted to say we need a tier above S.
Honestly, we might. Arbiter's Grounds is just so good. It's not my favorite. We'll get to that shortly. But, my god, it's so good. Arbiter's Grounds is the point where Twilight Princess stops being a fantastic game and starts being a phenomenal game. Because, like, holy crap. Once you get to this dungeon, things reach a new high, and that high kind of never stops.
Honestly, I would argue that for pretty much the whole game after Lakebed.
Yeah. Like, Arbiter's Grounds is like the turning point where things, they go from good to great.
So
And
where do we even start with this one?
let's start with the throwback, because my god, the throwback to the Forest Temple? That's awesome. Yes, people like to make the argument that, like, it's just rehashing an idea from a game they've done before. And yes, but it's not handled the same way at all. Like, not even remotely. You're still finding the 4 pose, but it has nothing to do with the bow. You're using abilities that are unique to Twilight Princess, the wolf, in order to do so. It's not handled the same way. It's a unique take on a similar idea. That's all it is. Also, Beyblade.
Beyblade.
I am a 22-year-old man who, playing this like last week, was out loud going whee while I was like on the wall. It's just so fun for reasons I can't explain.
The spinner is honestly one of the most amazing items in the series.
I'm just so mad that you never get to use it after this, really. You use it like 2 more times in the rest of the game.
You can also try to use it for combat.
Actually, that brings me to a point. I'll bring this up later because it becomes relevant in a dungeon we're going to talk about in a little bit. But, there actually is a little bit more use for it than I thought. But by and large, compared to every other item in any other Zelda game, it is borderline useless. But that doesn't matter too much when the few times you do get to use it, it's just whee! It's an item that I'm always excited to use.
Yes. Like, it reminds me of, like, grind rails in 3D Sonic games.
Yeah.
Or Kid Icarus Uprising.
It's just so entertaining in a mindless, unexplainable way.
Yeah, I think the only thing they could have done to make it better is let you shoot the bow while riding it.
Oh, that would have been awesome. I didn't even think about that. That would have been cool. Also, I wish it was more useful for travel. It's a little bit too slow.
Nintendo, make Twilight Princess 2. Hire me. I can give you ideas.
I was actually talking about this in another friend's server a while back, where, like, we were talking about, do you think there will be a Twilight Princess 2? And, like, I want one so bad, but I don't think there will be.
I know there probably won't be, but I really want one.
But if there were, there's so much potential. Anyway, back to Arbiter's Grounds. Like, this is the first dungeon where you have both Wolf and Human Link, and
Yeah.
it really makes you think about that. Like, there's a lot of gimmicks in Zelda games that are kind of, like, forgotten about in some dungeons. Like, the whole gimmick of Wind Waker is, like, the boat, right? You only use the boat in the Tower of the Gods, and only for, like, the first floor of it. Like, the first third of the dungeon, and that's it. There's, like, no other real gimmick to that place. Whereas the Arbiter's Grounds is the first dungeon in Twilight Princess to use the primary gimmick of Twilight Princess really, really cleverly.
Yeah.
And, like, you actually have to switch between them. You have to switch between them often, and you have to switch between them for creative reasons, like fighting enemies, finding the pose, tracking them down, doing things with items that you couldn't do as Wolf Link. Like, these are things that would not be possible if you did not have these 2 different forms of Link, and they utilized both of them so well in this dungeon, probably better than any other dungeon in the game. Like, they really make you think about which form you have to use. It's creative.
And any excuse to use Wolf Link is fine by me.
Yeah, like, Wolf Link gets some flack, but I honestly don't mind it at all. And in Arbiter's Grounds, it is put to such good use. There are so many very clever ways that Wolf Link's senses and, like, the scent tracking ability are used, using the sense to track down the pose, so that, like, it's not like in the Forest Temple where there's, and this isn't really a problem unless you get really sidetracked, but, like, there's a chance, slim chance that you could, like, miss a Poe and not know where it is. That doesn't really happen in this because you have a way of tracking them, and it's not, like, super handholdy. Like, you have to think about, oh wait, I have a sense. Like, you have to remember that that's a thing. It's not like a giant arrow pointing you in the right direction. You actually have to think about what you're capable of, and that's really clever. The ghoul rats, like, that's a thing that, like, that's one of those wow moments of you really realize just how clever of a game Twilight Princess is, because imagine you're going into that blind and not knowing that those exist, and you just suddenly go slow for a reason. You'll spend a good while kind of wandering around like, what the hell is happening? Why am I so slow? And you actually have to think about, wait, maybe if I transform and look around in another form, I'll see something. And you do. Like, that's such a good use of two different forms. It's such a clever use of your abilities.
Yeah, the first time that happened, I actually thought I accidentally put on the iron boots when I started slowing down.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things that really make you stop and think about what's happening and how you go about dealing with it. And it's one of the few dungeons in the entire series that really do that. That really, like, make you actively stop and think about what you need to do. Not just what you need to do, but, like, what's happening around you. Like, you actually have to stop and take in what is going on before you address how to handle it. It's not like you can solve the puzzles in this place before you get to the puzzle, which is a thing that happens frequently in other Zelda games, where you can, like, solve a puzzle by accident. No. Here you gotta kind of think about it. And it's really well done. Also, both the mini-boss and the boss are some of the best in the game.
Yeah.
Death Sword is a really cool mini-boss, and Stalord is one of, if not my favorite boss in the series. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's up there, for sure.
I think Stalord he would be my second favorite boss in the game, if not for the boss we'll get to later.
Yeah, there's another one that's making me hesitant to say that. And is there anything else you want to say about this place? Because that about covers it for me. It's just really cleverly designed, really good item, really good bosses, really, really clever use of game mechanics.
You hit everything that I was going to say and then some.
Honestly, I'm moving this to the top of S tier because it's just... This is what every Zelda dungeon should be.
This is what games should strive for.
Yeah. Speaking of which...
It's...
Snow Peak Ruins!
Yay!
Top of S tier. This is my favorite dungeon in the series. I'm just gonna say that right now. This is by a significant distance my favorite dungeon, not just in Twilight Princess, but in the entire franchise.
Well, go for it.
And also just one of my favorite locations in games, period. Like, I freaking love this dungeon. It has the best atmosphere seen in the series, second to none, except maybe the Forest Temple. And even with the Forest Temple, you kind of have to read into it to get that big picture idea that I came up with earlier in this video. But, like, my god, the atmosphere in this place, it feels so real. More so than any other dungeon in the series, this actually feels like somebody's home. And, like, there's no point in this dungeon that feels out of place. Like, it feels like an actual mansion. This dungeon is what made the first Luigi's Mansion so great, wrapped up in one dungeon. The atmosphere is fantastic. The item is also fantastic, which is also kind of useless. It's kind of a problem with Twilight Princess in general, but, like, the ball and chain is a power trip of an item. It's so cool. The mini-boss is a really clever idea. You steal the item from the friggin' mini-boss, which is something that the first dungeon of the game did too, which is really clever. The boss is awesome. The fact that you interact with the two Yetis throughout the place, and they live here, and they make it clear that they live here. Like, I really can't stress how cool it is to genuinely feel like you're exploring somebody's beat-up old home. And at no point in this dungeon is that immersion ever, broken. It consistently keeps that theme, and you don't ever feel like this is actually a Zelda dungeon. You feel like you're just wandering around somebody's house looking for something they stashed away somewhere, which is exactly what you're doing. And it never doesn't feel like that. So, yeah. The Yetis are great. The atmosphere in this place is great. The tone and, like, set pieces and visuals are phenomenal and so well executed. Like, I really don't know how to put into words just how excellent the theming of Snow Peak Ruins is. It's just so cleverly designed in such a way that makes you feel like you're actually wandering around somebody's mansion. And the place is all, like, beat up, and there's broken stuff, there's like personal belongings there that are just kind of not, they're not placed there for any reason other than to make it feel like a home. The visuals in this place come together to create an atmosphere that feels like a cozy house. And it's still kind of spooky at the same time, especially when you get to the boss. When you're fighting a corrupted Yetta, which is one of the biggest mood whiplash moments of the game. So that boss is also awesome. There's nothing bad I have to say about this place. It's my favorite dungeon in the series for a reason.
Yeah.
Is there anything you have to add to that?
I kind of had to leave in the middle of it to pick up my package, which is sitting right over there. I'm really excited to open it, but so I didn't catch everything you said, so if I repeat things, I'm sorry. I love the aesthetic, which I did hear you talk about. I love how this feels like somebody's home rather than just another dungeon. I like how it looks, how there's this big snowy field in the middle of it.
And it's just like, it's an actual courtyard, too. It's not like you're just in a random field somewhere. Like, it feels like something that would reasonably be built into a part of a home.
Yeah, I like the use of the ice.
I also, I touched on this while you were gone, but, like, I love that there's decorations everywhere.
Yeah.
It's such a nice touch that really makes this place feel real.
I even like how the boss door is customized specifically for this dungeon.
Yeah. And again, I talked about it before, but, like, the boss is great. The mood whiplash there is fantastic. That's a great twist.
Mm-hmm.
Also, this is the only time in the series where the way that a heart container shows up actually is, like, diegetic and not just a game design thing. And it's so cheesy and so stupid, I can't help but love it.
It's amazing. I love that.
It's just so... It's almost too on the nose, and it's just hilarious. It's so campy. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's got a great item, it's got great theming, a great boss, a really, really great atmosphere. I love this place. I love everything about Snow Peak Ruins. So yeah, I think that just about covers it. So let's move on to another hell of a hit. Temple of Time. My god, another S rank. Another. We've had 3 S ranks in a row from Twilight Princess. Just let that sink in.
Oh, there's still more.
And there's more to come. That's not the last one. Okay, so let's clear the elephant in the room first of all. This is the shortest dungeon in the game. That being said,
it is a dungeon that respects your time.
Yeah.
Now, with that stupid joke out of the way.
It's just a very well-designed, well-themed... It's the same thing we've been saying for the last 2 entries. It's really well-themed. It's very cleverly designed. It has a fantastically unique item, which is kind of useless outside of it. But in the dungeon, it's really cool.
For how short it is, what you do in it is some of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah. Okay, this is what I was alluding to before, when I said that the spinner is actually useful. I never realized how frickin' good the spinner is in the Armagoma fight until last night. My god, it mows through the little baby spiders. It shreds them. It is so useful for that. Okay, so this is something that I complained about the Shadow Temple for, and it might sound a little hypocritical, but hear me out. This is easily the most linear dungeon in the game. However, it uses that to its advantage, because unlike the Shadow Temple, which is kind of just like a straight line to the end, the Temple of Time is a round trip. You go to the end and back. And the way that you play on the way back is completely different than how you play on the way in. And it's all because of you having the Dominion Rod now.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's the same thing that makes the second trip to Forsaken Fortress so much more interesting, because you're exploring the same location with a completely different set of abilities, and the way how you go about doing the things you need to do is completely different. It's the same thing here, but done even better, because the item you get here is just so damn unique.
That statue you need to escort back to the entrance is amazing. Like, controlling it, bringing down the hammer every time you swing the rod, that is one of the best power trips in this series.
I love how it just, like, sends out a little mini shockwave, too, that kills, like, a bunch of those little spiders. Like, if you use it in the main central room and just whack it in the middle of the room, like, 20 of them will die. I love the scale puzzle, too. That was really cool.
Yeah, I like how it's different for going through and back.
Yeah, like, you actually have to think about, oh, wait, it's not... And Wind Waker kind of did that, too, with, there's a room in Tower of the Gods that does something similar, but this feels just... It's basically the same puzzle, but this feels different just because of the way that you interact with these objects. You're controlling them. It's not the same as throwing a statue from one scale to the next. Which, yeah. In essence, you're doing the same thing, but it just feels different. I don't know how else to explain it. Also, this is one of my favorite freaking puzzles in the series. Do you remember how you get the boss key in here?
Remind me?
This stood out to me the first time I ever played it, and I never forgot this. And I still think this is one of the coolest uses of, like, the game engine to create a neat puzzle. Basically, it's a small room. It's like an offshoot of the scale room, where you claw shot up to a top part of, like, a balcony, and there's 4 switches that you need to weigh down to get a gate to open that leads to the boss key. And there's only 2 statues in the room. So you put the 2 statues on the buttons, and there's 2 more buttons you need to figure out, and you're like, what the hell? There's nothing else in this room that you can use. And then you think about it, and there is. Because when you first walked in there, there's the Helmasaur things that you claw shot their little steel guards off, and then you kill them, and you have to hook shot your way up to there, and then claw shot the shield things to you, and use those as a weight to press down the other 2 switches. That's such a cool puzzle. That actually makes you think about, like, what in this room is available to me, and then at some point it clicks. You're like, maybe I can use that, and then you try it, and it works. That is one of my favorite puzzles in the entire series. Also, Armagoma's just a fun boss. It's really easy, but, like, it's cool.
Speaking of bosses, this is also, I know you fight this mid-boss ad nauseum later.
Oh, yeah, the Dark Nut.
But the first Dark Nut duel is super cool.
Yeah, it really is. And also, it's worth mentioning that, like, Dark Nuts are cool in every game, except Zelda 1. Fuck Dark Nuts in Zelda 1.
Also Zelda 2.
But, like...
Dark Nuts are evil in Zelda 2.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, the ones that throw beams. I like the normal ones. I just hate the ones that throw beams. But, the Wind Waker Dark Nuts are cool, because they're taking an established Zelda enemy and making it like a swordsman that you have to fight one-on-one. That in itself is already cool. Twilight Princess takes that idea and cranks it up to 11. It's so cool. It is one of the most thrilling mini-bosses in the series. So yeah, Temple of Time it's short, but everything in it is phenomenal.
One more thing that I do want to mention, and this is something because Twilight Princess was my first Zelda game, I didn't know about this before, but I really like how this is sort of the Temple of Time that was established in Ocarina.
Yeah.
How they add so much to it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I appreciate more now.
And something kind of touching on that, especially what I really love about this place is, again, Twilight Princess is really freaking good at theming. And this place feels divine. Like, that's the best word I can think of to explain it. It feels like, not a church, but like, it feels like a holy, sacred place. Like, there's no point in here where you feel like this wasn't constructed as a place of worship, and that's exactly what it is. It feels like a well-maintained, very, like, expensive to build, like, high architecture place. And that's what it is, and that point is emphasized ridiculously well. Visually, this place is beautiful. The architecture of it is incredible. But yeah, Temple of Time is really good. Easy S tier. So, City in the Sky. We talked about this on Discord yesterday.
Yes, we did.
And here's the thing. I do and always have considered City in the Sky to be the low point of the second half of the game. And I've never really been able to explain why.
Honestly,
I think I want to put it in B. There are things I really like about it, but at the same time, every time I play Twilight Princess, I never look forward to this place. This is always the part of the game where I feel like I just have to chug through it to get to the next awesome dungeon.
I do agree that it's the weakest of the second set of dungeons.
But let me clarify that doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah, for Twilight Princess, the low point is a plateau.
Yeah. It's still really good. It's just, it's an obvious step down from the Temple of Time.
But that being said, this is still A tier for me.
I kind of want to put it in A, but at the same time, like, there are things about it I just don't like. The first thing is that you get another claw shot here, which, in theory, is stupid, but the way they use it is really cool. The idea of giving you another item that you already have sounds incredibly dumb, but the way they handle it gives a completely new utility to this item, and it really does feel like an upgrade. Like, this is what the long shot in the water temple should have been.
Yes.
It's basically, it's the same idea of, like, get a better version of what you already have, but, like, something as simple as just giving you a second one sounds like it shouldn't work, but it does.
The claw shot was already my favorite item in the game, and I was stoked to see that I get another one in this dungeon.
Just, like, Spider-Manning all around the place is super cool.
Yeah.
Another thing I really like the boss. Argarok is an awesome boss fight.
Argarok is amazing.
It's a really cool boss. It gives me the same thrill as Morpheal, except that Argarok is actually a threat.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's basically, it gives me the same joy, but, like, with an added layer of intensity that Morpheal just doesn't really have. So that's automatically a plus. My biggest gripe with this place is that it's just, I don't know if it's actually really long or if it just feels really long, but something about City in the Sky feels like it just goes on for too long. It kind of similar to the Wind Temple from Wind Waker in that sense. Like, something about it just feels like you shouldn't be here for as long as you are. And I don't know if that's actually the case, or if it just feels that way. But from what I've heard from other people, most people seem to agree that this place is a bit on the long side.
Yeah, I do remember it feeling a little longer than it might actually be.
Also, I saw a Let's Play that pointed this out, and now I'm never able to unsee it, so now you all have to be cursed with this knowledge as well. The Uku have hooks on their nipples. You're welcome for that information. I'm not kidding. They have claws on their nipples. and now you can never unsee that.
I thought I was safe.
Now you can never unsee that. If I have to be cursed with that information, so do you. But yeah, I think I'm gonna keep it in B, because like the main reason that I'm not putting it in A, because I do enjoy the dungeon. It is a fun dungeon. I enjoy my time I spend there, but for whatever reason, every time I play this game, I always like, I don't want to say I dread getting to it, because that's not, it's not that extreme. I'm never excited to get there. Once I'm there, I enjoy it, but like, there's nothing that really makes me excited to go to the City in the Sky. And I kind of just want to go to other parts of the game, which are better.
I do like the City in the Sky a lot. I think it's really cool aesthetically. I like how it's a sky city, basically.
This is one thing that I never really thought about this until relatively recently. It's not something I just thought of now, but like, I didn't really think about this the first time I played the game. I kind of figured this out years after the fact, but like, I've been saying throughout this entire Twilight Princess section that like, Twilight Princess is really, really good at theming and atmosphere. Like, they're really good at making the dungeons feel like what they're supposed to be. The City in the Sky is the only one that doesn't really do that for me. And the reason is because it doesn't really feel like a city outside of the first couple of rooms. The first couple do, because there's the Uku running around, and they're running a store in like the first room. And like, you're interacting with them from the beginning. They have like the cannon, like a transportation method, like established for their culture. And all of that kind of goes away once you delve deeper into the dungeon. It starts feeling more like a dungeon and less like a city.
I guess that's true.
It's the only dungeon in the game that really does that. All of the other ones feel exactly like what they're supposed to be. And the theming of them is absolutely phenomenal. In the City of the Sky, it starts out doing that, but then it just kind of stops as it goes on.
The other thing I wanted to say is the enemy encounters here. The Aralfos are really fun to fight.
Yes, yes, I agree.
And this is just a personal memory I have, but I always really liked sniping Kargaroks throughout this dungeon.
I remember doing that too. Not like to the extent that you've told me, but I do remember doing that. But yeah, it's a good dungeon. It's a passable dungeon. It's a dungeon I can't really say too much negative things about. But there are things that keep it from being quite as good as the rest of Twilight Princess. And again, that's saying a lot, because it's still really good. So on to the Palace of Twilight. I'm torn. I'm very torn on this. It's gonna be either A or S, and I am having a hard time deciding.
Would me putting in an S help you decide?
I think I'm gonna put it in S, yeah. Because, like, the big gripe I have with the Palace of Twilight is that you don't really get an item here. You could argue that the sword getting the light kind of counts as an item, but also not really.
It's a new ability, sort of.
It's a new ability, but like, it doesn't really mean all that much.
I get what you're saying.
Like, it doesn't really feel like you gained anything, if that makes any sense.
You're certainly not going to have any utility for it outside of this dungeon.
It's also worth noting that, like, this is coming after back-to-back ridiculously unique items. Like, this is after getting the spinner, ball and chain, dominion rod, and a second claw shot. So, like, just an upgrade to your sword, in comparison to all of that you just got, really doesn't feel all that special. That being said, everything else about this place is incredible. The theming, again, is back to being amazing. This feels like the actual home of the Twilight. It feels like a foreign place that creatures of this race would inhabit. It feels like their natural habitat. If that makes any sense. Kind of dehumanizes them if you say it that way, but like, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. It feels like their homeland.
Yeah, it feels like a homeland to someone else completely foreign to you, and it establishes that tone perfectly. And it also, and this is something that other dungeons in the game also kind of do, but not to the extent of this place. You really see how much control Zant has over this. Because the only other places where you can really see that are in Arbiter's grounds with all the pose and whatnot, and to a lesser extent in Snow Peak Ruins with how Yetta transforms. But in Palace of Twilight, that idea of, like, an otherwise normal place being corrupted by somebody taking it over is not just present, it's in your face. He is chasing you for half this dungeon. And, like, you see his literal grasp on it. Also, like, the fact that the Twilight are all, like, transformed, and then you bring light to them, and they change back. Like, it's little touches like that make this place so memorable. Also, the Zant hand chases. They're really tense. They're really cool. I like the puzzles involved in, like, I think at one point you have to, like, climb a bunch of light staircases and then, like, hookshot it to you.
Yeah.
And then, like, jump off the back and take it through the door that way. And, like, that's a really cool idea. That's a really cool use of an item that you already have, and you're making use of something in your kit. It's clever.
And it's so intense, too, because you actually have to leave the item behind for a few seconds.
Yeah, it's actually kind of stressful. Like,
yeah.
And that's a good thing. Like, it's tense. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I don't like wall masters, but this is one of the coolest uses. No, this is the coolest use of the wall master thing that I have seen.
Yeah, I honestly agree with that. This is a really, really cool idea for, like, a dungeon gimmick. And it's not even, like, the whole dungeon's gimmick either. Like, there's also the gimmick of, like, touching the fog turns you into a wolf and there's nothing you can do about it. That's also cool.
Yeah.
Because there's parts where, like, you would handle this situation much better if you were a human, but the game, like, kind of pressures you into that back corner situation, and we're like, no, like, this is how you have to deal with this now. You're a wolf, like it or not. And this is a dungeon that constantly puts the player under pressure. And that creates a tense atmosphere that is not present in, I would say, any other dungeon in the series. This place feels tense. And just something about that just makes it very entertaining. And that's not even mentioning Zant himself. Holy crap, one of the best bosses in any video game I've ever played. Like, holy shit, it's so good. The Zant fight is one of the best bosses in the series.
And welcome to our 5-minute discussion about the Zant boss fight.
This is how you do a boss rush. Because it's not a boss rush, but it's the same idea as, like, taking little bits and pieces of things you learned from your adventure before and culminating them not just in rehashing, but in something entirely new. It reforms ideas that have been present in earlier parts of the game, utilizes them in a completely unique way, and applies it to one of the best villains in the series.
It's also just really good for theming, too. Like, I'm actually going to bring that up now. Zant is at the point where he is losing his mind. All of his plans have been foiled, and now he just wants to crush you.
Zant, story-wise, is going insane, and the gameplay reflects that. Like,
exactly.
You can tell this guy has lost it. And it's just a very great way of tying together both character development and game design, and, like, enemy design and boss design, and all of these elements that come together to make a fantastic boss fight. Combining that with character development is always going to be a setup for a phenomenal boss fight, and Zant is probably the best example of this I have ever seen.
I'm gonna say it. This is my favorite boss in the series.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's up there.
Final bosses, of course.
I think While it's not my favorite, personally, I think it's objectively one of the best, if not the best. Because it's just such a clever use of bringing back your memories of how you defeated these other bosses, but now you have to do it in a slightly different way. And then they also tack on, like, a couple of new forms that are completely original. Like the last one in front of Hyrule Castle? That's so cool! Like, and also, I just have to note, the way he attacks in that phase, especially, is so goddamn weird, and I love it.
It's hilarious.
It's just, again, this ties back to what we were saying before, is like, this is a man who has completely lost his mind. He has snapped, and there is no, like, you're at the point of no return. He has completely lost it. And the way he fights you, he looks like a mental patient. It's so well done. And that is a phenomenal way to cap off a dungeon. Well, the entire game has been building up Zant as the super cool-headed, ultra-controlling character. And this dungeon especially builds him up as that, because it's showing you firsthand the control he has over this realm. And then you get to him, he realizes that he's not in control anymore, and he loses his goddamn mind. It's just so well executed.
When he goes from being the Darth Vader of the game to, I don't know, Jar Jar?
It's just, I feel that's not even doing it justice. Like,
yeah,
because like
that's a really poor comparison.
Because the way he's handled in being like, not necessarily comedic relief, because it is comedic relief, but
I think
like
crazy was kind of what I'm going for.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be funny, but it's also not supposed to be super serious either, because like, this is a person who has realized that they no longer have the power that they once did. Their world is crumbling around them, and they are desperate. That's the sense that this gives off more than anything, is desperation. It's just so well done. I really can't put it into words how well executed that moment is. And this whole dungeon kind of builds up to that, and it's never boring along the way. So, one last time for us to praise the shit out of Twilight Princess.
Hyrule Castle.
Now, you put this higher on your list than I did. You put it in S, I believe. I think I put it in A. Maybe I put it in B, I don't remember.
You put it in A.
I'm willing to say that it's S, honestly. Remember what I've been saying this entire time about how good Twilight Princess is at atmosphere.
Yeah.
Hyrule Castle in Twilight Princess is the only time in the series where there is a castle dungeon that actually feels like a castle. Ocarina of Time is laid out like a dungeon. Wind Waker is laid out like a dungeon. The moon is whatever the fuck the moon is. This place, it feels like everything it's supposed to be, but it's eerily empty. And that goes such a long way that I can't explain in words. Because, like, it's just, you know that this is a castle. Everything feels like a castle. This thing is built like a castle should be. It has the courtyards. It has, like, the recreation rooms. It has, like, the main hall. It has guest rooms and stuff. It has all of the things that make a stereotypical castle. And there's nothing in it. And it's just creepily quiet. And that's what makes this place so good, is that everything is the way it's supposed to be, but you can tell something's not right. And it's subtle. It's so subtle, but it's handled fucking brilliantly. I can't put into words just how good atmospherically this place is, because it's so well designed, so well constructed to be a believable location, and it's just that one detail that's just a little bit off that really sets in the tone.
You just said everything that I was about to say about the atmosphere of this place.
It's scarily normal. That's the best way I can really explain it, because it's not like the other dungeons where Ganon has transformed it into something twisted. It's the same way as it was before, except there's nothing there.
You know.
And it's creepy. It's creepy. It's well handled.
Yeah, you know this is Hyrule Castle, but it's not the same.
Yeah, that's the best way you could ever explain this to someone. It's Hyrule Castle, as it should be, but something's not right. And it's just so brilliantly atmospheric. It's one of the best uses of silence in a video game that I think I've ever seen. In a way that most horror games don't do right. Like, I have played horror games that have been too loud, and that's a common problem in a lot of horror games, is like, they're too, like, in your face about scares and stuff. But this place, it's not even scary, it's just unsettling. And that's a feeling that I feel like games need to tap into more. Not being creepy, not being, like, scary or just outright intimidating or frightening. Just getting under your skin in a very subtle way. It's not enough to scare you, but enough to give you the feeling that something is wrong. That is a very unsettling feeling that very, very few video games tap into. And Twilight Princess is not even a horror game, and it does it better than most games I've ever played. This is atmosphere and tone at its finest, because the changes in this place are so subtle that it just drives home even more what kind of situation you're in. And I love it for that. So yeah, I think that about covers it. Twilight Princess has a lot of freaking S tiers, and for damn good reason.
I also want to give a quick shout out to the final boss.
Okay, here's the thing. I love the final boss of Twilight Princess. It's just too easy.
It is a little bit too easy.
I love it so much. I love the setup. I love the different phases. This is by far my favorite form of Beast Ganon we've ever seen in the series. Having him rampaging around the room on all fours, I love that. And no other game has given me that sense of intimidation of I am fighting an actual monster here. That's why I think that the Beast Ganon form we get to see in Twilight Princess is the best, because it's intimidating and it's feral. Like, it's just aggressive. And I love it so much for that. And I love the setup of riding on horseback through the field and having Zelda shoot him. That's such a great setup. And then the sword fight. Again, it's a fantastic setup. The atmosphere is amazing. The thunderstorm going on in the background or wherever it is. And then it's like everything in this fight is phenomenal. It's just not challenging enough. That's the only thing bad I have to say about it.
Yeah.
If it was just a little bit harder, we could have a contender here for probably the best finale in the series.
Honestly, I would still say it's the best finale in the series.
You also haven't beaten Wind Waker.
I also haven't beaten Wind Waker, that is true. I'll get to it eventually. Did we spend an hour on Twilight Princess?
Something like that. This is definitely getting divided up into multiple parts, by the way.